So after 2 days of solid rain, we started to see the glimpse of some light. Big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. So if you were following me on Instagram, you probably know that I've just been on an 8-day trip to the Outer Hebrides of Harris and Lewis. What an amazing place. We also went and spent some time on Skye as well. I was actually videoing a really exciting new project all about how I create my portfolio images, which I'll tell you about in a few months. But it was a really epic trip in more ways than one. The first few days of it, I have never ever seen weather like it. It's the worst weather I have ever photographed in. We even got on the national Scottish news. One of my videos of the old bridge on Skye with Rick, who I was with, who was helping me with the videography, was walking across. And I just videoed it on my phone just to show how high the river was. And we ended up on Scottish news. But it really was incredible. And we could have, for the first probably 3 days, it didn't stop raining, and we could have quite easily just stayed in, maybe just popped out of the camper van every now and then and just taken some photos and then, just sheltered. But we didn't do that. I am so glad that we didn't do that. And before I show you some of the photos, I want to talk about that a little bit, because I think it's a really, really important part of photography. I think in photography, there are very seldom times that you get the perfect light, and often those bits of perfect light appear when you're not out in the right place. Last night, for instance, I was walking upstairs, I looked out of the bedroom window and there was some amazing light, and it had been raining all afternoon, and then suddenly there was some amazing light. I was in the wrong place and it was no use. But when we were in Scotland, we were obviously there on a photographic trip, so it was probably made sense for us to go out, but we did more than that. We made sure that we went out and climbed up hills and got wet for hours on time just to hopefully get something that was a little bit special. And there are 2 reasons why we did that, and it's those 2 reasons that I want to talk through today and explain why I think it's so important to go out in really atrocious weather. And I also want to tell you a little bit about what I do when I'm shooting in the rain, how I protect my equipment, how I make sure that I get good shots. Just give you a few tips that if you do want to go out in the rain, or worse weather if it's really windy or whatever, that might help you to maybe just improve your photography a little bit. Okay, so why is it important to get out when the weather's bad, when it's raining, when it's horrible, windy, maybe snowing, cold? The times when you want to be inside. Well, with landscape photography, you have to be out in those times, because if you're not, then you've no chance of getting a good shot. The only chance you've got of getting a good shot is if you're out. And you've been there before, you've looked outside your window and you thought, I wish I was out. But that's it. That is the most important reason, that if you're not actually out, you have no chance of getting a good shot. And I wanted to show you some shots, and I'll put some video footage up here as well, so you can see the conditions and then what led from those conditions. So we first of all on this trip arrived in Glencoe, and we had a night in Glencoe actually. But when we arrived there that evening, it was just starting to rain. So the good weather had passed, and the bad weather was coming in, and it was starting to rain. We'd planned a hike, about a 400-meter hike, and it was touch and go whether we should do it or not. But we decided to do it. We got out and did this hike. So in the valley, we could have just jumped out the car and taken some shots and got the standard shots, but by hiking a little bit higher meant that we had a chance of getting something a little bit different. So I took this shot in the valley. You could see this was just when the clouds had gone through, the blue sky had been there, and I like this. It shows the juxtaposition between the passing of the good weather and the arrival of the bad weather. And I think that works as a shot, but it's a very standard location for Glencoe. Everyone knows that you can just park in a lay-by, stand outside your car, you know, get your camera and press the shutter button and jump back in your car. So it's nothing super special. So we put all our waterproofs on and started to hike up the side of the mountain. And it was horrendous. We got soaked and it was really windy. But when we got there, we had a vantage point that was amazing. But what was more amazing was that the rivers were starting to flow then. They got some water in them and they just started to flow a bit faster because it had rained in the day as well earlier. So not only did we have some amazing weather, but we also had some flowing water. And the water in the rivers tends to, in Scotland, go fast and then just die down quite quickly. So I managed to get this shot of the valley, which I thought was very dramatic. I really liked it. And then when we were walking back down, it'd been raining for a long time, and as we were walking back down in the pouring rain, you could just see how dramatic it was. You could see these rain showers just coming through, and even though I was shooting into the rain and getting rain on my lens, I kept wiping it and keeping it clean. I managed to get this shot, and this is something really, really special. We've got the recession of the mountains in the background, and we've got this stream just sort of leading through up to the distance. And again, because it's got a lot of water in it, because of the heavy rain, then it makes a big difference. You couldn't take that shot unless you were out in the rain. That shot is all about being on the mountain in the rain, and that's really important. And then finally, as we started to walk back down and got back down to the car, then it'd been raining really hard. There was still a little bit of light in the sky, and that light was reflected off the road. We were still a little bit high, and we got this sort of fairly different vantage point of the road just disappearing, and it makes a fantastic black and white image. And the same as what happened in Glencoe there, happened when I got to Skye. We're at the Quorang, and it was raining so hard, and we almost didn't get out of the car, but we decided to. Hello, Pebbles. Come up here. Come up. Hello, Pebbles. Say hello. So we're on the Quorang, and it was raining so hard, and we eventually decided, after getting wet the day before, very wet the day before, that we'd go out. We donned our waterproofs, and we went out in this horrendous rain. And I managed to get shots that not were only good, but different than what I usually take. I experimented a little bit. I got some really interesting shots, and I'll show you a few of them now. I'm sure you agree that there's something that's just dramatic. It's drama. It shows you the atmosphere, the mood of the location. It's how it's sort of meant to be, I think, on Skye. And if I hadn't have gone out in that rain, I wouldn't have got any of those shots. Okay, so the second point is that often the best conditions come just after the passing of that rain. And there's no point when those best conditions come just jumping out of your car and trying to find a composition. You need to be out in that rain, and then when the rain stops, you can then be ready to capture that moment in time. And this rainbow is a good example of that. We'd walked not actually that far from the car, but about maybe, I don't know, half a mile away from the car, and we were looking towards these mountains. The rain came through. It was absolutely atrocious. In fact, I don't think I've got any video of that. Really? But just after it came through, and it was so windy that it blew through so quickly, there was a bit of light, this rainbow appeared, And you can see how quickly it changed. You know, suddenly we got the skies in the background that were blue, but it allowed me to get this shot over the valley. I was in the right position. I knew what the composition was because I'd spent a bit of time there, and it meant that I could get that shot. And I'd been thinking about it and planning it a little bit whilst the weather was coming through. But I was ready. I was in position, getting wet, ready for that shot, and that's what's really, really important, and also really rewarding as well. It was so exciting to get this shot, you know, after the weather had got through, although we were absolutely soaked. And then when we got to Harris, which was the most amazing location I've ever been to for photography, it literally blew my mind. And more on that in a couple of weeks. I'm going to explain a little bit more about some of the photos that I took, including this shot here that I've printed out. So this is a shot that I took when I was on Harris, and the reason I wanted to show this is because it just shows why it's important to go out in any weather, really. So this was one evening that we'd arrived, the storm I was just passing through Harris, and you can see that in the distance here, you know, we got the clouds just coming off the mountains in the distance, and we had this super dark cloud going overhead, and it was sort of the image that I'd imagined a little bit when I went to Harris, if I'm honest. I wanted these sort of conditions, but I was so lucky to get them. When we first arrived at this beach, it was totally overcast. There was no breaks in the cloud, and the tide was further in, and it just didn't look good. And we could have quite easily not gone back and decided to go back to the cottage and dry off, because we were wet from all the other things that we'd done. But we persevered, we stayed around, and I got this amazing shot, which is one of the best shots that I've taken in quite a while. And I'm super happy with it. But it only happened because we stuck in conditions that probably weren't what I thought was going to be optimal. The light after this as well was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And then the next morning we went, which is when I was hoping to shoot this beach, because I thought it was going to be better in the morning. I went, and it just wasn't as good. It just was nowhere near as good. Although that was the morning which forecast the best light. It looked like everything was going to work well for that sunrise, but it just didn't. And if I'd just gone for that and not gone out in these bad conditions, I wouldn't have got this shot and many other shots on this evening that were really, really good in this stunning location. So what I want to do is just talk to you a little bit about how, you know, to shoot in the rain and the things that I do when I'm shooting in the rain. So the first thing is just making sure that you have adequate waterproofs. I think that's really important. You want to know that you can stay out in the rain for 3 or 4 hours with your waterproofs on, and underneath you're going to stay warm and dry. It's so important that, because if you get uncomfortable, you're just not going to want to stay out in it. So I'll link below all the equipment that I use, and I usually take with me 2 waterproof raincoats, so I've got a dry one if it does get soaking and it takes a bit to dry off. So that's the first thing. The next thing is an umbrella. It might sound really daft, but if you're not walking that far, having an umbrella is quite important. I used this a couple of times when I was there, not a lot. This is a new umbrella actually, which I've just got, which is called a blunt umbrella. And it's good up to 70-mile-an-hour winds. And I tested it out pretty well. It worked incredibly well. The next thing is on your camera, always have your flare hood on, because if there's just a bit of rain coming through like this, then this flare hood is just going to, you know, protect it a little bit. You're just going to get a little bit of protection from that, certainly on a 24 to 70 lens like this. So that's important. The most important thing though, more important than any of those, are microfiber cloths, and you probably need 5 or 6 of these, because as soon as they start to get wet and you wipe your lens down, then all you're doing is smearing it. And once you get a little bit of grease on that lens, then you're just smearing that grease on your lens, and you end up getting a very foggy picture because you've just not got a clear lens, and you'll get back and all your images will just be a little bit hazy. So having clean, dry ones of these that you can keep swapping out are really, really important. New cameras have a hydrophobic coating on it, and that hydrophobic coating makes the water bead, and it means that it's easier to dry it. If you have got a new lens and you've got hydrophobic coating on, it lasts probably between 6 and 12 months, then just lightly touching it is better than rubbing it hard. Because or even blowing it. You can blow the water off, believe it or not. But that hood's really, really important. I don't tend to put much on my camera. It's weather sealed and I trust the weather sealing. Now, a lot of people, when I posted photos on Instagram, were saying, why are you getting your camera so wet? It's going to ruin it. But it won't ruin it. Seawater's different. I want to protect it from seawater, but for rainwater, you can get a lot of rain on it. My Nikon Z7, it's the reason I use Nikon. I love them so much because they're so tough. And this got soaking wet and worked a treat really. But if you are worried about that, then what I usually do is carry with me some shower caps. So you can just get a shower cap like this, and you can just put it over the top of your camera, and then it's just, you know, when you're walking away from your camera, it's on your tripod and it's just staying dry. So that's a good idea, just a shower cap. Then the other thing that I get is make sure that you have some alcohol wipes. These are really, really useful when it's raining. It sounds really daft, but if you start to get smearing, then you want to get rid of some of the grease on your lens, because water and grease don't work together, and this will help you get rid of the grease. So by using one of these and just getting rid of that grease can help you keep your camera clean when it's getting wet a lot and the lens is getting wet. So there's some tips for keeping your camera clean, dry. Make sure when you get back inside after it's been wet that you let it dry out slowly in the bag, or put it in a bag when you take it out of your camera bag, because otherwise all that moisture will go inside your lens, inside your eyepiece, and it'll just condense out and you'll just get fogging, which is not the end of the world, but you want it to bring it to room temperature before you expose it to humid air. Now, I've made a blog of the photos that I've shown in this video, and I did that on Squarespace, which is the platform I use for my website. I've spoken about them before. You know all about squarespace.com. They're a fantastic platform for when you want to create your own website or you want to set up a domain. And it's really easy to use. You can see here how easy it was for me to just drag and drop my images, resize them, place them wherever I want on my blog. Go and take a look at my blog. You can go and have a look at it and my website. And if you want to make your own website, you want to share your photos on your own website where you have a lot of control over how you style it, then you can go to www.squarespace.com. And if you're ready to go forward for it and purchase it, then you can go to /Nigel for 10% off, or use offer code Nigel. So I hope that's helped. I hope that you found that useful. I'm going to talk a lot more about my trip to Harris in a couple of weeks, and certainly the beach shots that I took, and just a little bit more about seascape photography, because I think there's some things that I've learned in my trip there that I'd like to share with you guys. And like I said, the project that I was working on, I'm going to tell you more about in a few months. It's so exciting. I can't wait to share it with you. Okay, thanks ever so much for watching. I'll leave you with some footage from Harris and Lewis. What an amazing place. Bye.